Welcome to the Way Forward's candidate interviews before the 2020 primary election, which is scheduled for this coming Tuesday, June 2nd, 2020. Today's interview is with our very own Don Vymazal, who is running to build upon the legacy of our very much treasured retiring state senator, Andy Dinniman, here in the 19th District, Chester County. Welcome, Don. How are you?
Very well. Thank you, Garen and Eric. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. The Way Forward community in Phoenixville, and I apologize, that's my dog in the background. You have to say hello. Never one of these types of interviews doesn't go by without him chiming in. But
no problem. You're likely to hear from one of my three dogs at some point today, too.
One of the new luxuries of remote working, of course. Yes.
Yeah. So, Don, why don't we start with you telling us a little bit about why you decided to run for office at this time?
Absolutely. And I think the reason why I've decided to run for office is the same reason why I've enjoyed my experience working in the office with Senator Dinniman for the past 15 years. It's about serving the community. It's about being a public servant that makes decisions not based in political motivations, but based on what's best for the community. When you look at Chester County and you look at the wonderful communities that we have, the neighborhoods, the boroughs, the rural open space that we've all worked so very hard over the years to protect and preserve, it's a wonderful place. And I drive around this county as I have been, over the years, and I'm able to see some of the projects that we've been involved with, and incredibly proud to work with a wide variety of community partners of all political affiliations in order to just do what's right for Chester County communities. So I'm looking to continue that in a new role as senator, continuing the public service legacies that I've been working on very successfully and happily for the past 15 years. It's very motivating to work with members of our community, and we have some great individuals all throughout Chester County that get the job done and get it done right. And I plan to continue to do so in the Senate.
That's terrific. We know that you are the candidate who is endorsed by the Chester County Democratic Committee. However, you are in a tough three-way race in the upcoming primary. How has your campaign adjusted to the situation created by the pandemic? And have you been able to reach a lot of the voters that you will need to win this primary?
This is a great question. And we do believe so. I was honored before the shutdown occurred, before the pandemic really reached the heights in Chester County, that to have a nominated convention where members of the Democratic Committee endorsed my candidacy by almost 70% of the vote. It was an overwhelming endorsement, and I was incredibly proud to have received it. And I do believe a lot of those that voted for me during that endorsement convention, it was based on my work with them over the years, not only on political matters, but of course on local community matters. There's a lot of those individuals that serve as committee people are also township supervisors or school board members. And we've had a great relationship over the past 15 years working to just improve and make lives better for our constituents and citizens of Chester County. In terms of the pandemic, yes, of course, COVID-19 has changed quite a bit. Normally at this time of the campaign, 1 week out thereabouts, I'd be taking advantage of the day like today and be out there knocking on doors and meeting directly with voters. Sadly, that's not the case. However, I had someone when I was discussing how to shift gears in our campaign, and it was the perspective is important. I think in public policy and public service, it's all about perspective. Rather looking at what we were not able to do, not able to knock on doors, not able to have rallies. What this has done is allowed us to focus our efforts into those areas of campaigning that are effective. So we have a greater amount of focus on and attention on social media and virtual, having events such as these, connecting with voters that may not go to a town meeting, things of that sort, may not attend a rally, but they're going to log on when they see a link pop up, and it's a good opportunity to get to know the candidates. So reaching out to voters directly through phone banking. And a lot of folks, when we call them, are going through some really tough times right now, and really just are appreciative to have someone reach out, especially seniors that may not have as much contact in the community, especially with our social outlets such as the senior centers and things shut down. So what we've done, and what I believe we've done very successfully, is focused our efforts on what we can do not dwell on what we're unable to do. That said, throughout this campaign, as we're reaching out, we've been able to help quite a few people as well. Again, those phone calls, when we're trying to connect with them to get them to make sure individuals aware the primary date was moved to June 2nd, and that there is an option this year to vote by mail, so you do not have to go to the polls if you're worried about COVID-19. And through those conversations, we've had some individuals that need assistance. They need food. They need guidance, advice, how to apply for the right loan application to keep their employees paid during this period of shutdown. And we've been able to assist, pointing them in the right direction, and trying to make this experience as best as possible for everyone in the community. So yes, it's been about campaigning, but it's also been about helping out in the community as much as possible. And I think we've had a great experience doing that.
Yes, thank you. Don, can I ask you a question? You got involved with Andy Dinneman's office 15 years ago, correct?
2006.
2006.
Yeah, when he won a special election, he brought me on board. But I was working at the time for a state senator in Berks County, but living in Chester County. And he brought me on board in order to develop his constituent relations team. So I was director of constituent relations. And we put together an organizational structure to ensure everyone gets an answer as quickly as possible. And so I've been working with him ever since. It's been a great experience.
Is that your title now with the senator's office? You're the constituent advocacy, excuse me.
No, I transitioned a few years after, I believe it was 2009, and focused on government relations, primarily at the local government level, and working with communities on focused issue projects that developed, and really being a liaison between Chester County communities, nonprofits, business, municipalities, and state government. So trying to unravel those tricky problems that sometimes develop with too much red tape. So my responsibility through that government relations role would be to cut through that red tape in order to ensure local organizations receive the information they needed. And then since then, I transitioned not just to government relations, also working on more of the policy side of things. So developing legislation and working with our community members to put forward regulatory change and reform that works best for not just Chester County, but the state as a whole.
Thank you, Don. In this day and age, people look at politics and they use it as a bad word. And when politics really is the dispersal of resources and working with government and the people to do it. Is that how you see politics versus the curse word that we say politics as usual?
Politics does have a very unfortunate connotation to it. And politics, really, the way I view it, is just a negotiation between parties in order to find a compromise that works in the best interest of all those involved. That's something I've been taught. And along with my professional career, I've had an academic career at the same time, going for my master's in public policy, and I'm currently working on my dissertation in my doctorate program, again in public policy. And what I truly believe, and why I've appreciated that program, both programs, so much, is it's about a public servant. It's about doing what's best for the community. That if you're going into this line of work, this public policy, this public service, you need to view it as such, rather than trying to advance your own political career, political future, or financial opportunities. It should be viewed more, how can you help as many in the community as possible? So I understand the negative connotation of politics, but that's not necessarily the way I view it. It's really just negotiations. It's trying to find the best way possible to find a solution to very complex problems. And we have a big state, differences of opinions abound, but we often, very often, and I've seen it, are able to find solutions that benefit the majority of Pennsylvanians throughout our Commonwealth. And that's something I'm very passionate about, is finding really what unites us more than what divides us, and moving in that direction. So that's my own personal belief, and something I feel I bring to the job every day.
It's kind of a terrible sign of our times that, like, right now, the folks who get the most attention are the ones who are most divisive, and the bridge builders are the ones who are often ignored. And for example, if you want your donations to pour in, say something crazy and outrageous, and then all of a sudden your donations start pouring in from the extremes of the base. But as a student of government, do you have a theory of what the proper role of government should be in a civil society? I mean, we've seen Republicans over the decades malign the role of government to the point where, they say the thing that you should fear the most is somebody showing up at your door saying, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. But I think, well, I'll reserve what I think, but what do you think the proper role of government is?
I think those elected to serve in a public position need to do that, serve. It shouldn't be about themselves. It shouldn't be about getting the headline. And of course, getting those donations. That is an unfortunate side of it. I'm more focused on doing what's right for the community and our greater community of the whole state. There's many that impact us locally that equally impact those in central PA and eastern PA, school funding, for example, environmental concerns, transparency in government. These are issues that impact all Pennsylvanians one way or the other, regardless of political belief and political ideology. And if we work towards what's best in improving those areas that impact everyone, I believe we're going to be successful regardless of the normal and unfortunate connotations associated with the political theater that often develops in Harrisburg. So that's my own personal belief and something I've been my entire professional career with the Senate. That's something I brought forward. We need to work together on good ideas to improve the community, not improve our own standing and our own political future. We have to just do what's right. And I think if more people took that approach, we would remove some of this gotcha political back and forth where the lightning rod candidates and elected officials attract the attention to get the headlines. I think that's divisive. I think that leads to stalemates in our public policy system, and it's something I'm going to fight to reject. Every day that I'm in Harrisburg, as I've been doing for the past 15 years with Andy Dinniman, and prior to that with Senator O'Pake.
You mentioned education and some of the disparities that exist in the state of Pennsylvania, particularly. How do you feel, and what policies and legislation do you support?
And that's to unpack that problem, we would need more than the time allowed this afternoon. It's something that's been building up, those discrepancies between school districts. It's been a horrific problem for years, and one we've made Band-Aid approaches in Harrisburg to reform, but there have not been any drastic steps to really make it fair. We were working, this is probably about 5-6 years ago, regarding the Keystone exams, and when there were attempts to tie them directly to graduation requirements. And we were pushing back against that. And during our conversations with school districts, we know our top performing school districts locally, Phoenixville School District, Westchester, things of that sort, Downingtown. In their classrooms, they have teachers dedicated to just train students how to take the test better. They have special science instructors that are able to gear students towards those tests. They have 3D printers in some of these rooms, which is fantastic. We have a wonderful education system in Chester County. I don't think we should dismantle that in any way, shape, or form. But that said, in conversations with, for example, Overbrook High School outside of Philadelphia, rather than having a 3D printer and a teacher dedicated just towards teaching the students, we're hearing from professionals there that they're using the Keystone exams, or they were. I think that practice has likely at this point been resolved. But for a period of time, they didn't have enough textbooks. They didn't have science teachers that were certified in the content that was being tested. So they were using the Keystone exams to determine what students would receive the textbooks and what students would really be sent to the gym for the foreseeable future. And that's a problem. That's a huge problem that if we're setting up students at that much of a disadvantage, how are we expecting, if you don't have the educational opportunities, and it's that the disparities are that great, how do we expect a student to get ahead? So we need to reform that. And there's been efforts. The fair funding formula that they worked on diligently for 2 or 3 years would go in a very strong direction towards making a fairer system throughout Pennsylvania by tying in a variety of factors towards the funding formula coming out of Harrisburg. That said, it's being implemented slowly, and I understand why. A lot of the well-performing schools with a fair funding formula could actually receive a negative impact by this, which then potentially would push those costs onto taxpayers. So we have to be cognizant of that, but also at the same time making sure that everyone, every student, every child in our community has an equal access to educational opportunities. There's a way we can do this. First off, we have to increase funding out of Harrisburg, of course, and do so in a fair formula, a fair way. That's the first step. Also, the biggest problem I think we have in education and the Commonwealth right now, and this is one that obviously in the global pandemic world doesn't receive the attention that it very well may, it has in the past, but our pension crisis. It's an overwhelming amount of debt that the Commonwealth is in based on decisions made back in 2000, 2001. And the state made efforts in 2010 under Act, I believe, it was 120, I believe, of 2010 in order to hopefully slow that exponential growth of our pension deficit. So that made steps, but it quite frankly did not do enough. So when we allocate funding to the schools, a lot of that funding is directly being eaten up by our pension issues. So until we get a handle on that, it's taking away money that could and should be directed towards our vital services, our education, our infrastructure, environmental reforms. These are things we could fund a lot better if we had a better grasp on our pension problem.
You mentioned environmental issues, and I know that's something that falls near and dear to your heart. Can you expand a little bit on that and some of the threats you see and how the state should be involved?
Well, the biggest threat that most recently is how our federal government is taking advantage, quite frankly, of this current crisis. They're dismantle some of the protections that we've had in place for years. And unfortunately, in some regard, the state has followed suit. This virus has exposed weaknesses in our system across the board, and environmental protection and environmental regulations was not excluded from that. We need to strengthen the amount of resources we're allocating towards inspecting. We are, at this point, a heavily industrialized state in terms of petroleum industry. And I've seen the impacts firsthand. I went out to Western PA, into Washington County to view what they're referring to as a cancer cluster, a very rare form of childhood cancer that is in Western PA, and it's impacting so many in our communities. I apologize. So I drove out there. I stood on the porch of an individual who, he leased some property to these companies to come in and drill. He was promised millions of dollars, and it was an offer he couldn't refuse. To date, his water has been totally contaminated. His son, he put him in the bath, came out with scalding blisters on his body. He himself spent weeks in the hospital with kidney failure from drinking that water. Various cancers formed in his family. The foundation of his home from water runoff from this drill pad has completely eroded his foundation to the point where his house may no longer be livable in the very near future. And he has also, on top of all that, received zero money in terms of revenue from the drilling. It is a stone's throw from his front porch. I've seen the impacts that this industry has had on everyday folks in very rural Pennsylvania. And of course, locally, the pipeline issue has been a very prominent issue for many years. And it's one I fought personally against. When the first well was impacted on Valley View Drive in West Whiteland, I was out there that evening in the one gentleman's home to discuss what options we have. I reviewed the permit applications cover to cover, which is something I never thought I'd say out loud, to Chapter 102 and 105 permits, but had to go through with a fine-tooth comb to find out really what went wrong here. And we found out a lot that went wrong. And I remember being how hopeful when we found after the wells were impacted, and we wrote a letter to Secretary McDonald, the Department of Environmental Protection Secretary, basically saying they were supposed to identify these wells and take care of the folks to make sure they weren't impacted. That didn't happen. Police shut this project down until we can figure this out. It was a very, I thought at the time, this was 3-4 years ago, a very common sense type of approach. If people's personal property is being directly harmed by a company trying to make money, the state has a responsibility to step in and rectify that situation. It fell on deaf ears. Since then, we've sent dozens of emails and letters to the Secretary of Environmental Protection, brought forth a complaint in front of the PUC that ended up going to Commonwealth Court. And I've written many, many letters to Governor Wolf so far to no avail. So we have a long way to go in environmental regulations. And I'm going to, this is a priority of mine in Harrisburg, is to continue to put pressure on those that will work against environmental controls and to ensure everyone in Pennsylvania it has access to their constitutional right of clean air and water.
I like to remind people that that crazy progressive Richard Nixon was the one who found the Federal Environmental Protection Agency. So I just don't understand how we went from that to now where clean air and clean water are fought over politically. Like, how could that not be universally desired by every single citizen in this country? Like, what are the counter arguments that make the GOP in Harrisburg repeatedly vote in favor of polluters and at the expense of the health of every one of their constituents? How does that come into play?
Well, the short answer to that, unfortunately, is there's two factors that really influence those outcomes: money and lobbyists. And having worked in Harrisburg, this is something we've taken. If a lobbyist comes in to talk with us, and lobbyists do have a resource to provide, they are the experts in their given area, but they're only going to tell you one side of the story. It's their job to only tell you one side of the story. So I know personally, if we receive something from lobbyists coming in asking for us, advocating for us to vote one way or the other, this is a policy of Senator Dinniman and one that I hope to continue or plan on continuing when selected to the Senate. But on that issue, he'll reach out to the nonprofits and community members in Chester County who would be impacted by that, saying, here's what we're hearing from paid professionals in Harrisburg. What's your take? And in some cases, after we vet it through the community, they're fine with, maybe they want some few changes or amendments to it, but on the whole, it makes sense. In other cases, there's a whole other side of the story that we're not receiving. So I think it's important when we're approached, and frequently are, by those in Harrisburg that are paid to present their opinion, we need to go back to the community and say, here's what we're hearing. What do you think? And that's something Senator Dinniman has really instilled in us. So if there's a big vote and we're getting pressure from one side or the other, it's something that we reach out to the local community and try to get their opinion on it. So that's something I plan on doing. I know others have started to do that more often because Senator Dinniman is very vocal about his approach. I think that will counter some of the pressures that we're receiving in Harrisburg. Just, let's hear from our constituents. Let's hear from our community. These are the individuals that vote to send us there. So we need to reach out. It has to be a two-way street of communication, and I firmly believe that.
Yeah, I mean, Senator Dinniman has always been known as an environmental champion, and he was winning elections here in Chester County well before Chester County flipped from Republican to Democratic. So do you think that your message will reach the same voters that Senator Dinniman did here in Chester County?
I think so. I think I've worked with many of those same members for many years. These are organizations and individuals that I've worked on multiple issues, be it environmental issues in Exton or ratepayer water issues down in southern Chester County, helping to build playgrounds, preserve open space, ensure our historical sites that are vital to our sense of place in Chester County are maintained and people know about them, quite frankly. So the message he's always provided is this isn't about politics, this is about people. And that's one I believe in firmly and something I plan on continuing. So I know he's received support from many in our community. And these are the folks I've worked with as well. So these are not strangers that I'm trying to let them know who I am and what I stand for. They have 15 years worth of examples of what I plan on doing in the community to continue the good work that we've been doing in Chester County and make those difficult decisions in Harrisburg that benefit everyday people back in Chester County.
So no doubt you've been speaking with a lot of your neighbors and a lot of voters in Chester County. So what has been foremost on their minds for this particular election cycle? Well,
there's really a couple things. Obviously, I want to make sure if we're touching base that everyone's healthy and that they're doing okay given the circumstances. So that's obviously talking about how different our day-to-day have been. Is a topic that comes up. Short of that, some of the changes to our election cycle. This largely has been the longest election day we've had in Pennsylvania. The way I see it, we're a week out from the actual in-person voting, but people have been voting for a month.
Sure.
It's about 4 p.m. in the afternoon on election day is how I view it. We've had almost 60,000 mail-in ballot requests. So anyone listening, if you received the ballot and have not had a chance to mail it back in, You do have an alternative option. Two, really. First, you can bring it to Government Services Center. There's a drop box on the right-hand side once you walk in the door. I believe that's 601 West Town Road in Westchester.
Mm-hmm.
The other option, if you're unable to make it in there and you do have to go in yourself, would be to vote via provisional ballot at your precinct. Now, bear in mind, a lot of these precincts have been consolidated. So please view on Chester County Voter Services. They have an updated list. I know in Phoenixville, for example, we've had 5 precincts consolidated into, usually we have 12. So out of the 12, 5 have been changed, and we're doing our best to get the word out about that. And I know Voter Services has as well, but there is going to be some confusion on Election Day.
Oh, yeah.
Those are 2 of the biggest issues. Also, people just want to know, if I haven't had a chance to work with them in the past, where do I stand? And I enjoy those conversations. It's getting to know your community and getting feedback and questions and concerns from them. They want to know about my opponents as well. And we've taken the approach of really trying to have a respectful campaign across the board, largely because I don't personally, having worked many campaigns, I don't personally like that side of politics. It's always, if I'm a campaign manager or a volunteer even on a campaign and the candidate goes very negative, you get that feeling in your stomach that this isn't the way to win. If someone's going to do that to get in, you have to wonder what they're going to do when they're in office.
Mm-hmm.
So we've kept it very, very civil. I've had a long relationship with both of my opponents. We've always said no matter who makes it through, the other 2 are going to be the #1 volunteers to down June 3rd. So
That's good. But, having said that, I'm sure you have ways of differentiating yourself and your policies and your policy objectives from theirs. And I'm sure voters would like to know what makes you different from your opponents.
And I point to my experience in working with our community for the past 15 years. I have a dedication towards community first in that way. And my endorsements have come from community officials. They come from elected officials at the local level, supervisors, borough council members, school board members, community leaders. So I like to say one of the main differences is I'm not endorsed by the special interest in Harrisburg or the alphabet soup organizations out there. It's really the local community that's stepping forward. In terms of what really differentiates me from my opponents, Kyle's he's on the school board in Tredyffrin. He's been on there for 2 years, and I think he's got a great future ahead of him. And Carolyn, the biggest thing I hear about her, especially from the Westchester, is since she's running for both the House seat and the Senate seat at the same time, that's been something that people have been raising quite a bit, that we've just explained that it's legal, technically under the state law. It doesn't explicitly, there was a court case many years ago that said since the Constitution doesn't explicitly prohibit that act, it's allowed. But that's been something some of the Westchester area have been raising a lot of questions about. So I'm here really just to not, #1, continue the legacy of Andy Dinnaman, of course, but also to put my own mark on what it means to be a state senator for Chester County. And my own personal view, and this is something I tout very, very directly, is transparency, open government. We can do this better. There's a way to encourage public communication. Right now we have insincere public comment in many cases. We submit the forms, we send it in, and we don't necessarily see much change associated with that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm of the mindset we can have a 2-way street of communicating. In fact, it will make better policy in the long run if we handle some of those questions up front from the community, that they're going to be dealing with the issues directly. So there's a way we can absolutely do this better, and that's something I think sets me apart from the other candidates in this race, because it's something I care about. It's something I'm writing my dissertation on: transparency and public participation in Harrisburg. So I do care about those issues, and we'll absolutely work to have them implemented when elected.
Very good.
Don, as a businessman, I've gone up and down with the essential versus non-essential businesses with the regulations at the state level from the governor, and I respect a lot of what they're trying to do, but there seems to be some fine-tuning needed in defining why a large business like a Home Depot did not have had complete exemptions, and a lot of small businesses didn't. I saw that Senator Dinniman came out and kind of supported loosening some of those exemptions in our county. What are your feelings on the restrictions and exemptions?
Well, this is something I've been working on with Senator Dinniman, of course, just in terms of fielding those questions and concerns. He put me in charge of working with small businesses in the community. First off, trying to get those waivers granted by the administration, and then second, any appeals to those waivers, and then finally trying to get funding for those that did not receive waivers and were eligible to receive PPP funding and other types of programs. So since the shutdown occurred, that's been my day-to-day from my 9 to 5 largely. That said, the waiver process to begin with has been fraught with problems, and there has not been transparency from Harrisburg. So the one thing I think we need to find out exactly how those decisions were initially made in order to adequately really deal with a response to open up successfully. Regarding the lawn and garden centers and those types of those businesses like yours, of course, that are a lot of the public went to those big box stores because they were allowed to be open for a period of time. I think that's wrong. Quite frankly, there was not necessarily parameters that I saw that were very transparent as far as what was approved and what was denied. So for example, in the case of the lawn and garden centers and things, it would be, right now we have takeout being allowed for restaurants. The current situation we have by forcing everyone to go into the big box stores in order to receive the goods and services they require would be the equivalent of shutting down all restaurants statewide and forcing everyone to go into the food court at the mall. It's just driving everyone into one place, whereas you have a much, much smaller volume of individuals at our local small businesses, which are the backbone of our economy. So in terms of lessening, I think with the numbers trending the way they are, and we're seeing the county commissioners, of course, have been very direct with the governor saying we're ready in order to loosen some of the restrictions and do it safely. I think safely is the operative word. We are able to take common sense approaches. The real estate, for example, we were the last state in the nation to change that and allow real estate to get back to work. And I personally have heard horror stories from constituents throughout Chester County where they may have sold their home and were in the process of buying their dream home, and then the state was shut down and they were unable to. This is a vacant property where if 2 people go into the home with one real estate, they're using proper distancing, masks and gloves or what have you, travel separately. Every other state in the nation was allowing that to occur in order to keep people from being in such situations where they were literally stuck homeless for a period of time. It did not make sense to me that we were not doing that in Pennsylvania. That was something I fully support. Other issues, I know other states that may not have been hit as hard or have and are now relaxing them. I think we have to work together. We have to look to see what other states are doing as well and what's working and what isn't. We can do both. We can protect public health while ensuring economic success. We have to use common sense. We have to take the politics out of it and just focus on what makes sense to do right now and what doesn't. So again, a lot of this is driven directly from the complaints and calls that we've received. The one example I provided, this came from one of the telephone town halls we had. 2 architectural firms out of the Westchester area decided to work together and submit their waiver request initially. So they both worked on the application. It was identical. The only thing different on the applications it was the name at the top of the form. And one architecture firm was approved, another one denied. That doesn't make sense to me. That's a very subjective decision-making process without the necessary rubrics and parameters needed in order to provide that transparency. You know, Eric, from a business perspective, you're looking to the future. You need concrete and understanding things change, of course, especially during a global pandemic. But as a state, as a government, I believe we need to be as transparent as possible to help individuals and businesses make decisions with the most information they can. That was not done in this case, and it needs to be resolved as we move towards reopening.
I'm concerned because I think that the fundamental problem here was that the federal government offered zero leadership. This administration offered zero leadership in the face of a pandemic. In fact, it was nothing but chaos, forcing the states in some situations to compete among themselves for resources, for PPE, for other things, and bid against the government, the federal government, for those very same resources. And now folks like the governor are left with trying to save the lives of their constituents and doing so in the best way they know how. And by taking advice from epidemiologists or virologists or other experts into how to prevent this thing from spreading. But we're in a situation now where we've sat in our homes for 7 weeks, 8 weeks, but there hasn't been rampant testing. There hasn't been contact tracing. And now that these restrictions are being slowly lifted, my concern is that it was all for nothing, because we could be back to ground zero in a week.
I agree. It's a huge concern, and I've said throughout this, when I'm speaking with individuals, just calling around or they're reaching out to us, we do need the testing, we do need contact tracing. Other states are doing that, we can do it as well. And Governor Wolf's press conference earlier today, he did address that, saying they are ramping up. They are working on getting additional contact tracing efforts in place. Testing, and to your point about states bidding against each other and making it competitive, even counties at this point. We've been very, very blessed in Chester County under the leadership of our Chester County commissioners. They went directly to manufacturers and internationally in order to request some of the PPEs and testing supplies. The antibody testing that's being rolled out locally, that's coming from a Chester County company. Who had reached out to us that they developed.
You don't have to be an economist to know how much more expensive that is going to be, rather than the federal government doing it on behalf of all Americans.
It would make sense, and I thought the regional approach, with Pennsylvania joining other governors in the Northeast,
yeah,
I'm very hopeful that would result in some bulk savings on some of these items. And I think in some cases that did occur. But largely, it was not only the approach to shutdown and now reopening, really, it divided up counties as well. And again, I think that comes back to the fact that we didn't really have the necessary guidance and transparency regarding the initial shutdown in order to put forward a comprehensive strategy that would have allowed for real information to be out there. And a key component of getting that data is contact testing and contact tracing.
Yes. Yeah. My sense was that we were just doing that to buy some time, and that the time that we were buying was to be used for almost universal testing. Like we're still at the point, I think, where only the people who show up to hospitals or who go through doctors are being tested. We're not at the point where people are opening up testing facilities and parking lots and you can just drive through and get swabbed and figure out whether you have it or not. And that's a problem with a disease where 35% of the infected people are asymptomatic. And, you could literally be walking around infecting tens of hundreds of people and not know it.
And I know there's been arguments, and this debate about reopening or remaining in place has, unfortunately, when it delves into the political side of things, that's when I feel it's problematic. So what we've been hearing largely over the past 2 weeks is, yes, 40%, there about, I think 43% of the cases are in nursing facilities, living centers of that sort. But I think that argument falls flat. It's accurate, sure. We always know that the most vulnerable of our populations would be hit the hardest by this. We're seeing that internationally. But to say that's a sacrifice worth making, I believe is wrong. Number one, those are individuals that don't deserve to be in a situation where they're placed in harm's way simply as collateral damage.
We're all going to get old, folks, if we're lucky.
That's the plan, yeah.
You don't want the next generation deciding that you've lived long enough.
But I think that argument always falls flat. And even if someone is willing to accept those numbers as a sacrifice for the greater economic good of our Commonwealth and our nation, which I find abhorrent, of course, but the nursing home staff. We have the Southeastern Veterans Center right north of Phoenixville, where it was a hotspot statewide in terms of veterans, senior veterans that served our nation. getting sick and dying from this virus and impacting the staff there to the point the National Guard had to be called in order to help facilitate some of the staffing responsibilities because so many individuals were either quarantined or out with COVID. That's a problem. So we need to, whatever opening plan we have in place, and it does seem to be the governor's moving towards shifting some areas to green on Friday and the southeast area to yellow within the next 2 weeks. Whatever plan we put in place for that has to take into account our senior living facilities. Those are our family members, our neighbors, our community. And how we treat them is going to be a reflection of who we are as people and who we are as Chester Countyans. And I think we in Chester County are better than that and are going to be able to do better in order to protect everyone in our community, not just the select few that have economic value, so to speak, under the strategy there. It's just, it's wrong. And it's something that if this, and we'll see what happens. Hopefully this virus, by the time November comes around, is no longer a factor. But some of the reports demonstrate it may be with us for a while. And it's something we have to consider because moving forward, just accepting collateral damage is not acceptable, in my view.
It's good to hear you say that, Don. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Don, the budget of Pennsylvania will be severely affected by the economic impact of the COVID virus. And surely there'll be some budget shortfalls and there'll be a push on some sides to cut essential services to balance that budget because we don't have the luxury of deficit spending. How do you stand on protecting those programs that might be cut, or how do you see resolving this budget problem?
Sure, having worked through economic downturns in the Senate in the past, I see how this is now playing out. You're absolutely right. They're in the Great Recession. A number of agencies were slashed to the bone in terms of their finances. They were left with bare bones staff, left to perform to the best of their ability with limited employees. Most notably, of course, Historic Protection at PHMC, Pennsylvania Historic Museum Commission, DCNR, Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, and DEP had received significant cuts. There have been reductions or flat lines to a lot of the quote unquote vital services that are provided. But they were only just recently beginning to reemerge to pre-recession levels when this hit. So I'm very concerned about the operations of some of those services throughout our Commonwealth. That said, I know the budget's starting today, and there is motivation from elected officials on both sides of the aisle to get something forward in a very short period of time. Their leadership of all caucuses have been meeting throughout the weekend. Last night there was a caucus meeting for the Senate Dems where they were discussing priorities and where there's going to be some opportunity to move forward. What we're hearing will largely happen hopefully this week even, quite frankly, based on some of the conversations, is a short-term budget. This is primarily due to the fact, if you look at the budget numbers that came through in April and May, they were roughly 50% down, depending on sectors, in terms of revenue intake. That has a huge impact, putting the total annual budget projections to about 9 to 13% below estimates, and this was a couple weeks ago. That's millions of dollars to make up, billions in some cases. So what they're looking at doing is putting forward a 5-month budget, just line item funding, just keeping static, all operation funding for those 5 months. However, because school districts have to come up with their budgets much sooner than that, they're looking at school districts have to present their next year's budget by, I think it's June or July, around that time. Education funding with this budget that's hopefully going to be passed this week or next week will contain a year's worth of education funds. Again, we're negotiating exactly what that means now, but education will be funded for the next full budget cycle. So that's fiscal year 2021, whereas most other services will potentially receive a 5-month budget. And then we'll have to go back again when new elected officials come in order to negotiate the remaining part of the fiscal year. We'll have a better view. I think that is in some ways a good approach. We don't know what this time next year is going to look like. We don't know what it's going to look like 2 months from now. Taking the approach where we're going to use the revenue we received, use some of our rainy day funds. Thankfully, the state did start in recent budget cycles to replenish that fund. Make it for the next 5 months and take a look at our surroundings, take a look at our economy, see what options are available from the federal government, and then move forward at that point. So this budget, at least for the next 5 months, hopefully will not be confrontational, hopefully will not be political. because we don't have time for that right now. We just have to do what's right for our communities and set politics aside during the crisis.
Don, are there any endorsements that you want to highlight?
I've been endorsed by a large number of individuals throughout our community. I would hate to start listing them off, but if anyone is curious, please feel free to check out my website, which includes all my endorsements, and that's donvforsenate.com. My last name is a little bit complicated, Vymazal, so we really decided to focus on Don V. As far as I'm aware, I'm the only name with a V, starting with a V, last name, starting with a V on the ballot. So
A V for victory.
that's right, absolutely. In addition to that, of course, I was very honored to be endorsed and supported by my longtime employer and mentor, State Senator Andrew Dinniman, who has been very supportive. He's given me so many opportunities over the years to help improve our communities, and this is he went above and beyond, really helping me and guiding me throughout this process. So he's been instrumental. I've also received the support of Representative Danielle Friel-Otten. She's been very active. We've worked together for many years on the pipeline issue and other environmental issues statewide. Also, Food and Water Watch have endorsed me, and I've been working with them on a variety of environmental issues for a number of years. And also, Del Chesco United for Pipeline Safety. They stepped forward and provided their endorsement, again, because of the work I've done with them. But really, I am, and also, of course, the Chester County Democratic Committee countywide has endorsed me for this seat, which I was honored to receive. But most of all, I'm very thankful for the support of the community members. These are individuals that make the most difference in the lives of our citizens, the township supervisors and borough council, school board members, and community leaders. These are the individuals that everything that you see and feel from government, for the most part, they're the ones making those decisions. And I've worked with them over the years, and having them, so many, be willing to step forward and say that they want to see me serve in the Senate and that I'd be a great partner to improve the communities, working with them as a partner, has meant the world to me.
That's great. Other than voting, what can members of the Way Forward do to help you win?
Well, really, I mean, other than voting yourself, trying to make sure this is a very, very confusing election. This is an election where a lot of people may have applied for ballots and have not gotten them back in yet. There's going to be, with voting precincts being consolidated, that's going to cause, and I'm worried about individuals that have always voted at the fire hall, and when they go there and it's shut down, rather than trying to locate their alternative voting location, they go home.
Or the school.
Exactly.
You can't vote there either.
So we have getting that awareness out there to as many in the community as possible. We're trying to get the word out from our campaign's perspective. You know, obviously there's name recognition there, but also we want to make sure as many people exercise their civic duty and go out and vote. Far too often we have a low turnout, and that impacts the quality of our elected officials. And what we need is for as many people as possible to get involved in your local community, get involved with the issues occurring statewide and federally, but most importantly, make an effort, make a plan, and go out and vote. So in terms of the organization, helpful, we're trying to just make sure everyone knows, because it's a very chaotic time, and you know, with everything else going on, I know their attention is being pulled in multiple directions. This is adding to it, but any assistance you can provide with the Phoenixville and greater area throughout Chester County, making folks aware June 2nd is an election, and we're trying to get as many people out, you know, to vote as possible.
That's great. Eric, anything else?
Well, I just want to thank you for interviewing with us. We had the fortunate ability to meet him on several occasions, and we joked last time we saw you, Don, I think it was at my house, that we asked, well, when are you going to run? And you said, well, you're very happy in your role. But as I listened to you intelligently and with depth answer these questions we give you, it shows to me exactly how good you are or would be on this role. And we are so thankful that you're running and presenting your expertise, your integrity that represents much of what Andy Dinniman stood for. So thank you very much for running, and I appreciate you interviewing with us.
Thank you for those kind words, and thank you for the opportunity. I was saying, this is going to be a strange campaign where I'm going to go through the 90% of it without shaking a single hand. That's not something that's normally done.
I think the handshake might be done forever.
I'm worried about it. But no, I'm looking forward to being able to attend your meetings in person. I never thought I'd miss meetings as much as I do in person. Hopefully we can get back to that as quickly as possible. I appreciate what you're doing in the community, really making an impact and getting awareness out for a wide variety of very vital issues that improve our democracy, not just locally, but statewide and nationally. So thank you for your work. And I'm honored to be here today, so I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks again, Don.
Don.
Thank you.